Alright guys, hey, so it's Wolf the Gamer Reactor, and I'm gonna react to Did Mulan Really Save China? That's it from Game Theory. I'm really excited, and also please subscribe, and alright, so,
With the impending
yeah,
release of
let's go.
Disney's live-action version of Mulan, one question looms largest on the internet. Will there be Szechuan sauce?
In 1998, they had this promotion for the Disney film Mulan, where they created a new sauce.
Yeah, I think I remember that. I do think I remember Szechuan sauce. Yeah, that was a good joke in Rick and Morty, and seems like, did they really bring it? I really want to know. I hope that...
For the McNuggets called Szechuan sauce, and it's delicious.
With that one clip from Rick and Morty, McDonald's special limited edition nugget sauce released to tie in with the original Mulan movie became the sauce that was heard round the world. And after that clip, the company did do a limited re-release of the fabled Szechuan sauce, causing some badly behaved Rick and Morty fans to low-key riot.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, that was very hilarious. God, that was like...
But now, here we are, on the cusp of a new Mulan movie and a second chance for the world to experience that liquid gold yet again. Make it happen, McDonald's. Hashtag bring back the sauce. I want to try this stuff, and I refuse to drop 14 grand in the Szechuan sauce eBay black market. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show where our reflection shows the intense overanalysis and mild anxiety of who I am inside. It's no secret that I've been
yeah. Look at that new map pad. He looks pretty good.
Live-action Disney remakes each and every time they come out. And sure, sometimes you can't really recreate the magic of a beloved childhood classic, no matter how much Beyonce you rub onto it. But if my hopes are high for one of these remakes, honestly, they're probably highest for Mulan. For one, Mulan isn't gonna have to revolve around CGI.
Yeah, I remember that time.
Animals that somehow feel less realistic than the two-dimensional drawings that they're based on. But I also feel like Mulan is the forgotten youngest child in Disney's really strong stretch of movies from the 90s. Oh, Mulan, you made the soccer team. Good for you. That's nice. Meanwhile, your
I don't know. I don't remember Mulan. I know it, but like I guess like, it makes sense. It really wasn't really much of Disney's greatest.
We love you
or,
all
most
equally.
remembered.
The original Mulan, though,
remembered.
deserves some respect. I mean, nobody doesn't sing along when I'll Make a Man Out of You comes on at karaoke. And Mushu belongs in the canon of great animated sidekicks. I mean, when you think about it, isn't Mushu basically just Donkey from Shrek in dragon form? All the way down to Eddie Murphy?
It could be.
A movie about a protagonist reluctantly going on a journey to save their home, hiding their true identity from their love interest, all while accompanied by an Eddie Murphy voiced sidekick. Is Mulan actually the first Shrek movie?
I think that's possible.
At any rate, Mulan also gives us one of the best action sequences ever from a Disney movie. When Mulan fires a rocket at a mountain to create an avalanche and bury the invading Huns, who,
by the way, I must say that's my favorite
history,
shot
but who's
ever.
Track of
like
stuff? It's a
the
cool
best.
Piece of
yeah, that's like a really great shot. I love it's so cool to see that. Like, it was amazing when it first came out, and it still is, for the most part.
Disney meeting MacGyver, and it's one of the most epic moments in all of Disney films. It's also one of the deadliest moments that we've seen in a Disney film, as we calculated in the past theory. But now that we're on the cusp of this new movie, it makes the theorist in me wonder, how realistic was that scene? Could you really cause an avalanche with a giant Roman candle? And could Mulan have done so hundreds of years ago when the film took place? It's gonna take researching a number of questions from history and physics to get to the bottom of it. So let's get down to business, and we'll make some puns. To figure out just how realistic this whole scene is, we've got to answer a number of initial questions. Question number one, can a small explosion create an avalanche? We've all heard that if you're mountain climbing, you shouldn't scream for fear of causing an avalanche, but that's not really a thing. No joke, it's a complete myth. Sure, your voice may be powerful, and yeah, it may echo off of the mountaintops, maybe, but your voice alone simply doesn't have enough force. Scientifically speaking, the pressure amplitudes caused by shouting are about 2 orders of magnitude smaller than the amount it takes to set an avalanche off, which then merits the question, what can cause an avalanche? Well, an avalanche is a lot more complex than just a bit of snow sliding down into more bits of snow. Believe it or not, there are actually 3 different types of avalanches. Dry
snow. What's the third one? I know dry snow,
wet
I
snow,
think.
and
I learned
slab.
it.
For each
one
one,
time.
it's as much about having the right conditions for an avalanche as anything else. You need a steep mountain slope, you need snow cover, a weak layer in that snow cover, and finally a trigger. Now, a dry snow avalanche, or powder avalanche, occurs after fresh snowfall. These tend to travel very fast.
Really?
Up to 190
yeah, I guess that
miles
makes
an hour.
sense.
That's
it is
about
a
300
if it's
kilometers
powder,
an
it
hour.
must run
These
fast.
things start all light and fluffy and are very visually beautiful, but beneath that misty powder cloud is a rushing mass of snow that, when it comes to a stop, is about 4 times denser than when it started. Meanwhile, a wet snow avalanche is caused by the snow strength decreasing from either melting or rainfall. Because everything is so moist in the snow, there's no pillowy cloud with this one, making everything look much more like a landslide. It also makes wet snow avalanches much slower, about 10 to 20 miles an hour or 15 to 30 kilometers an hour. But both of these two types of avalanches pale in
What's the big three? Let's find out.
comparison to the third type, slab avalanches, which account for about 90% of all avalanche-related deaths. Basically, you have yourself a solid slab of snow resting on a less stable layer of snow underneath it, and when that weak layer fails, the top slab slides, taking everything with it. And when I say taking everything, I mean it. A typical slab is about half the size of a football field, and about 1 or 2 feet deep, 30 to 60 centimeters. They start off slow, but they can quickly accelerate to around 80 miles an hour, or 128 kilometers an hour in just a few seconds. So basically a giant sheet of snow and ice heads straight down a mountain at 80 miles per hour. With all that being said, the avalanche that we see in Mulan is absolutely a slab-style avalanche. So what can trigger an avalanche? Well, it can really be any number of things, from earthquakes to wind to snowmobiles. If it can disturb the snowpack enough to loosen that top layer of snow, gravity is just going to do the rest. Assuming that all the other conditions are right, could an exploding rocket act as a trigger? Well, yeah, they do, frequently. Small controlled explosions are often used to cause small periodic avalanches in order to reduce the likelihood of giant catastrophic
nice
avalanches.
animatic,
So much
I
like
think.
controlled
Yeah,
burns are
animatic.
vital to preventing
Maybe
huge
not.
forest fires, little man-made avalanches keep skiers from becoming human popsicles. The explosion that we see when Mulan's projectile hits the top of the mountain doesn't have to be gigantic, it just has to disrupt the snow enough to cause a snowball effect. So it's safe to say that the answer to question 1 is a yes. Question number 2, can an avalanche actually take out an army? The short answer is yes, and we have history to prove it. During World War I, Austro-Hungarian troops built barracks and fortifications in the Italian Alps, settling them at high altitudes in the hopes of being out of range of mortar fire. But as it turns out, mortars shouldn't have been the biggest of their concerns, as the barracks were buried by a series of avalanches in December of 1916, with the largest of those coming on what is now known as White Friday. These avalanches brought massive casualties both to the Austro-Hungarians as well as the Italians, with total estimates of life lost
That's
that
a
day
lot
anywhere
of
between
lives lost.
2,000 and
So you're telling me this thing
10,000
could kill like
people.
a bunch of like
avalanches
a
definitely have the
practically
power
a
to decimate an
army of
But
men.
these troops were mostly standing still. In
Wait,
Mulan,
that's the
Shan
question?
Yu's army is charging on horseback
I'm
towards the
pretty
Chinese
sure,
when
yeah,
they're
you
swept
kind
up
of
by the
showed
avalanche.
pictures,
So
so
would
it
the
must
cavalry
be, yeah.
charge have simply outrun
It
the
has to
avalanche?
be.
If you're paying attention, you know the answer is no. At their fastest, most cavalry charges top out at 10 meters a second, which translates to about 22 miles per
Really, I
hour.
would have thought they'd be faster. Well, who knew?
Sure, horses can go faster than that, but given that the not technically Hun army is charging through the snow, it's probably safer to say that they weren't going faster than 22 miles an hour. Avalanches, on the other hand, can easily reach speeds of 80 plus miles an hour, so turning around or getting out of the way isn't going to be in the cards for the Huns. The avalanche that we see in Mulan is going to catch up to those troops, and it's likely going to devastate their entire force. So the answer to question number 2, we can definitely say again that it's realistic. But okay, avalanches are dangerous and they're not that hard to cause. Big whoop, says you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I'd be like, honestly.
Rocket artillery. The real question is number 3, whether Mulan could have hit the summit of the mountain with a rocket to cause that avalanche in the first place. This is the question that gets the most complicated because it requires us to make some decisions about the world in which Mulan exists. For one thing, when exactly is Mulan set? The kind of weaponry she would have used is highly dependent on the era, but the movie gives us some mixed messages. The original legend of Hua Mulan placed her life in the 5th or 6th century century AD during the Northern Wei period of Chinese history. But the Huns weren't around at this point at all in history. To make things even
The
more
Huns were not
confusing,
at
the
that
depiction of the
time?
Great Wall of China
Really?
in Mulan
I
looks
never
like the parts of the
thought
wall that
that.
were built during the Ming Dynasty from the 14th to the 17th
Pretty
century
old
AD.
time.
But the kicker for me here is the existence of the imperial city in the first place, which was also built during that Ming Dynasty. So, for the sake of argument, let's just say that Disney's version of the Mulan story takes place in a later medieval China, no earlier than
Medieval
the 14th
China.
century. In that case,
Honestly,
the
that
rocket
makes
we see
kind of
Mulan
sense.
fire at
It
the mountain would
does
have been
look
historically
medievalish
accurate for that
for a
time period.
Chinese.
The first recorded use
I mean,
of rocket
for
weapons by the
China.
Chinese
Sorry
occurred
if it
against the
sounded
Mongols in the
racist
Battle
or
of Taikang
anything.
in
That's not my
1232.
intention.
Yeah. The artillery in this battle were known as fire arrows, which were basically small explosives attached to arrows that helped them fly straight before they exploded on impact. Basically, they were the equivalent of bottle rockets. But what we see in the battle scene of Mulan is something much larger and a whole lot more complex. The most likely inspiration for Mulan's rocket launcher was a device called the, and apologies for butchering the pronunciation, Huolong Shu Shui, which translates to fire dragon issuing from the water. The Huolong
How you
Shu Shui was one
that?
of history's first examples of a multi-stage rocket, where an
What?
initial fuse was lit to propel small rockets, which would then in turn
A
fire the
multi-stage
larger rocket when
rocket.
the fuses burned out. It's pretty
Yeah, I
darn
would have
sophisticated
thought they'd
technology
do
given
that.
that the world was still several
Not
centuries away
bad.
from
Not
electricity
bad,
and
not
indoor
bad at
plumbing.
all.
An estimated range of the Huolong Shu Shui was a pretty impressive 1,800 yards, slightly over a mile. So it's definitely a long-range weapon, but is it long-range enough to hit the mountaintop that Mulan is aiming for? To answer that, we need to determine where exactly in the world we are, and that's where things start to get a little messy. Everyone in Mulan refers to the battle site as the Tungshao Pass, which would make things easy if Tungshao Pass actually existed. Nor is there a super obvious mountain pass between the Great Wall and Beijing that would be the real-world stand-in for Tungshao Pass. However, Disney's production team did travel to several places in China while researching for the film, and one of those locations was Luoyang, very close to Hulao Pass near Mount Song. This is the likeliest culprit of our inspiration for Tungshao Pass because Luo Pass is the location of a few different battles from Chinese history, including one concurrent with the original Hua Mulan story. So let's assume that the real-life version of the mountain pass we see in Mulan is around Mount Song, which at its peak has a height of 4,961 feet or 1512 meters. As we just mentioned, the Huolong Shu Shui had an approximate range of 1,800 yards, which is 5,400 feet or 1,645 meters. Now granted, Mulan isn't firing the rocket straight up, and Pythagoras would be quick to tell us that the measurement that we're looking for is the hypotenuse of a right triangle that takes both the lateral and vertical distance into account. So if we take a look at the angle at which Mulan is launching the rocket, we get a launch angle of right around 45 degrees. That means that if the total range of the rocket is 5,400 feet, the rocket could travel both a horizontal distance and a vertical distance of about 3,818 feet or 1,164 meters. That isn't quite high enough to hit the summit of Mount Song from ground level, but remember, Mulan isn't at the base of the mountain. She's already pretty close to the top of the cliff. As long as they're already about 1,000 feet up the mountain, which appears likely based on the treacherous steep cliffs below, then Mulan's rocket absolutely has the range it needs to hit the sweet spot and cause that avalanche. So on today's episode of Mythbusters, film theory, we can say that Mulan's artillery is sufficient to cause a potential avalanche, that it's historically accurate for the Chinese military to be using that device.
Yeah, very interesting sort of rocket.
And that the outcome of the avalanche would
that's
be
a crazy
just as
amount of people. Like, look at that. Just
it requires some estimation.
that's like the craziest.
Plausible all the way through, as long as
I mean, like, who would ever survive that?
But here's the real twist of today's episode, my friends. Even if Mulan didn't hit that mountain with the rocket, there's still a good chance that the not Huns were gonna die in an avalanche anyway. You see, National Geographic estimates that 90% of avalanche disasters are
fun
triggered
fact,
by
National
humans,
Geographic's on Disney Plus,
or
so even they. Even the facts are owned by Disney.
Are enough to cause an avalanche? How about a cavalry charge made up of hundreds of stampeding horses? I mean, we just talked about the various triggers an avalanche needs, including small explosions, disruptions in the snow, or earthquakes. And something about hundreds of horses thundering down a mountain all at the same time suggests that there might just be enough force there to cause a chain reaction. Provided the other conditions that we mentioned before are there, snow-cover, steep slopes, and weakened layers in the snowpack, it doesn't really matter if the trigger was an exploding rocket or a charging army. Mulan made a great shot for sure, sure, but Shan Yu's army was doomed as soon as they decided to go through the mountains in the first place.
The quickest way to the Emperor is through that pass.
Nah, no good idea. Not a good idea.
Just a theory. A film.
Yeah,
Theory.
I like
now,
that.
if you'll excuse me.
Alright,
Since
thank
Mulan
you
just
for
got
all
delayed, I
that.
guess I have to settle with rocking out to some I'll
Yep,
Make a
it's
Man out of
delayed.
you.
I never knew that.